Hello, my name is Emily Hendrickson, and this week we went over family law. The case that we covered for this week is Aldalva versus Johnson. So, to begin with, the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act. That is what was utilized in this case. So the Kentucky Supreme Court case of Aldalva versus Johnson utilizes the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction and Enforcement Act, also known as the UCCJEA. This act was proposed to deal with interstate custody battles that span multiple jurisdictions, providing guidelines and authority to the home state that the child resides in with a primary caretaker for at least 6 consecutive months prior to the initiation of a child custody proceeding. UCCJEA is crucial in family law because it drastically reduces the time and conflict associated with jurisdictional battles by emphasizing the importance of a single court making the decisions involved in a custody battle. So how was home state jurisdiction decided? So the argument was between Texas and Kentucky. Texas's claim, to preface, Aldalva's occupation constantly had that family moving around. 5 months after the child was born, the family briefly moved to Washington. However, Texas claimed jurisdiction over the child on the basis of the Aldalva family still receiving mail to their home address in Texas, and they were living in hotels and Airbnbs in Washington. Texas also pointed out that Aldalva's next job site was in Texas, to which the family returned to after Washington. So they kind of treated it as like an extended trip kind of away from Texas. They didn't see it as an actual residence switch. And then Kentucky's claim, the initial trial court found the opposite. They surmised that the state of Kentucky held primary jurisdiction because, quote, Aldalva testified that he signed a lease in Washington, received mail in Washington, and had an indefinite end time for his stay, unquote. The court found that this fact interrupted the 6-month residency requirement for Texas to establish primary jurisdiction and thus invalidated Texas's claim. The Kentucky Supreme Court established jurisdiction by means of utilizing the temporary emergency jurisdiction provision of the UCCJEA. This awards emergency home state jurisdiction in order to protect the child and caretaker. The Kentucky Supreme Court asserted that Kentucky had properly used temporary emergency jurisdiction under KRS 403.828 because of the Kentucky EPO filed by Baum in 2020. So, what standard did the Kentucky Supreme Court adopt for determining whether an absence is temporary under the UCCJEA, and why is this significant? According to the UCCJEA, the only exception to the residency rule is temporary absences. But what constitutes temporary absence? This is an area that the UCCJEA is not specific on, so it leaves arguable interpretation and speculation as to what defines a temporary absence from residence, allowing courts to utilize an objective or subjective standard. Quote, courts applying the objective standard tend to focus on a bright line of where the child lived for the 6 months immediately preceding the filing of the suit. Alternately, courts applying a subjective standard look to such factors as the party's intent, the length of absence, and the child's prior contact with the forum, unquote. The case states that Kentucky does not have a specific standard for evaluating temporary absences, but the court typically relies in essentials on the objective standard that prioritizes the child's current state of residence. The inclusion of the standard undoubtedly proves that Kentucky is the home state and should have jurisdiction over the custody case. Why did the Kentucky court rule that Texas's later assertion of jurisdiction was invalid under the UCCJEA? The Kentucky Supreme Court stated that Texas was not aware of the EPO filed in Kentucky when it first claimed jurisdiction over the custody case, meaning that Texas could not have possibly known which state had jurisdiction. The case stated that by the time the Texas court made a determination of home state jurisdiction in reference to the UCCJEA, the initial trial court, which was the Jefferson Circuit Court, had already placed jurisdiction in Kentucky. And then this is my reference. Thank you.